social media seriously for ads? And I guess there are people who think it isn't. You might have heard from them. So I guess I'm going to give you a perspective on that. Specifically, I think, one of the challenges is that quite often the term social media actually isn't that helpful a term. It brackets together things that are actually very different, very divergent. Different products do different things. And I think, one of the challenges is trying to identify. We think of Twitter specifically, not necessarily as a social product, as an information product. So like an interest network that connects you to the interests and passions that you've got. Sort of aggregating all your interest DNA together rather than connecting to social connections. So I'm just going to sort of give you a perspective there. I guess the challenge there really then is I'm not sure my clicker's working. Fella at the back. There you go, it's working now. So I'm going to talk about these, heuristics. And Rory might talk about these later on. So heuristics. What are heuristics? Sort of rules of thumb. Sort of the notion that we're able to interpret the complexity of the world largely by what Daniel Kahneman, who's a behavioural economist that Rory might mention later on, he talks about the brain being a pattern recognising machine. It's the only way we can interpret millions of pieces of data that we're seeing at any moment is little rules of thumb. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. That's what I do. The challenge of that is, especially when we're sort of working in a business environment, is that heuristics can sometimes be misleading. So you might have seen this specifically when search arrived. When search arrived, I think the challenge for a lot of people, certainly in marketing, was what is it? Required a whole load of interpretation. It was confusing what search actually was. And what happened was, a while into it, after sort of Google's 14 years old today, a while into search, someone said, oh, search, it's a bit like direct response. And so the shortcut became, the heuristic for search became, search is the new direct response. And the truth is, search is a little bit like direct response, but it's not direct response. It's the way we interpret the information around us, it's the way we sort of interrogate all of the information in the world around us. But yeah, it is a little bit like direct response. And that's the challenge with social media, really. The challenge with social media as a term is that it sort of almost obscures as much as it teaches us. So specifically, we get comments from people where they're trying to interpret what social media does and how social media works. So specifically, you might have seen this quotation. Twitter is a PR medium, not an advertising medium. And I guess it doesn't matter who said it, but it sort of gives you a perspective of some of the ways that people are looking at this and maybe making decisions about how it works. So what I'm going to do for you this morning is firstly explore that information network notion and explore that maybe this isn't a social product and maybe sort of the social bracket isn't necessarily a helpful thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to illustrate for you how we see this working and really how being adjacent to people's interests and passions is an incredibly potent way to move people emotionally, to move people almost to propel their actions, also to an extent to help move brand narratives. We're going to go into that. So I mentioned that Twitter, we see it as an information network. And one of the things that we see is that we get feedback from most of our users saying Twitter helps bring them closer to things, helps bring them closer to events, to celebrities, to passions. And so you might have seen during the course of the Olympics a whole load of people following Olympic accounts. Here's one of the things that we saw. LOCOG came to us, so the organising committee came to us a few weeks before the Olympics and said, we're thinking of putting mechanical cameras, so just robotic operated cameras, in 20 different locations. This was one. This image here is of a camera beneath the pool at the swimming zone. I just love this because it does bring you closer to the event. You can see, I don't know if you can see this here, but that's Michael Phelps and his reflection off the surface of the water. It brings you closer to what's happening. And sometimes our founder, Jack Dorsey, talks about Twitter being the world in your pocket. So you follow 50 to 100 accounts. Often they're an aggregation of your interests and passions. So there might be the news, or there might be commentators from your favourite newspapers, or things related to your football team. Or, in this case here, a camera that brings you closer to things. So not only does it bring you closer there, it also brings you closer to some of the people talking about things. So let me show you this. This is a tweet from Samuel L. Jackson. So the only way to read a tweet from Samuel L. Jackson I've found is for me to do an impression of Samuel L. Jackson. Now, this isn't world class. Like I said before, those Brits are some peddling, record-breaking, mother-cycling fuckers. Congrats, UK. Okay? I'm not going to do any more impressions. So not only do you see that someone is involved, and actually sort of is a three-dimensional person rather than a celebrity, but you also get responses to it. A response from Chris Hoy, probably my favourite tweet of all time, thanks. So bringing you closer to the people participating in events. And what we find is that when you're adjacent to people's passions and interests like that, it can be an incredibly explosive place to be. So I just want to give you this illustration here. My clicker is, there you go. This is a piece of work that we've done with Compete to try and understand this. So we worked with Compete to try and understand what is this interest element of the product. So here's what we looked at. We tried to understand what people were following. Half of all people on Twitter follow a musician. This is a place for passions. It's not baby photos. It's not sharing the meal that you're consuming right now. It's about just connecting with the interests and passions you've got. So half of all people follow a musician. And that might be Rihanna, or it might be Katy Perry. Both of them have got 25 million followers. Or it might be just the guy who plays at your local pub, who has his Twitter handle on the leaflets he hands out. People follow TV shows, films. You see down the bottom there, a third of all people follow a retailer. This is a place where you sort of connect with the businesses and interests that you're maybe in the past you'd have gone into and seen there's a sale. Now you look at these things and you try and get the information sent directly to you, sent directly to your phone. So we've talked about interests and passions. I just want to show you really how that has an impact. We talk about Twitter being the shortest distance between you and what interests you most. So that ability to, at a glance, see all the things that are happening. And I guess you is represented by the @ handle, so the @ username, and the shortest distance between you and what interests you most being represented by the hashtag. Those things coming together. Hashtags are sort of a fascinating thing because I think people are really intrigued. They seem marginally esoteric. I want to illustrate for you how powerful the idea of a hashtag can be. This is a clip from ITV's X Factor from a week and a half ago. I don't know if anyone saw this. Did anyone see this? So what you're going to see here is two things. Firstly, you're going to see a young woman performing her own song, which is about sort of post-drink regret. So you'll see the word beer fears on the screen. That's the title of the song. You can see two things. You're going to see the tweets during the course of the show. In this episode of the X Factor, there are 250,000 tweets on the hashtag X Factor. So there are a whole load more. There was sort of multiple times that, just spontaneously tweeting about the show. But then during the clip, ITV drop a hashtag on the screen. And I guess what I'm going to try and illustrate here is the ability to move people and draw them to that focal point, draw them to that campfire of discussion. Let me play the clip.
Sitting in a cupboard with my weird best friend, but I'm only young, so I'm not gonna pretend I wish I could stop, cause I'm not joking. I love drinking too much and socially smoking. Don't wanna stop or learn to behave, amen. And I just missed another day again.
There were 27,000 tweets on that hashtag there and then, so just immediately stimulating it. And I guess the brands say and advertisers say, but can we take advantage of that? Can we use that? This is a TV campaign in the US. I think it's a really mediocre ad. But the point I want to illustrate is that even with weak creative, you can create that same engagement. So this is a 15-second ad for Audi. Just watch, the hashtag appears at the end credit. So the end credit, so long vampires, what immediately happened, so I just captured the screen as that happened. And in this case here, there were about 25,000 tweets on that single hashtag, on a single ad. So you can see the black line is mentions of Audi, and the bottom one is mentions of so long vampires. So it holds that conversation together, and really it shows the ability, when you sit adjacent to people's interests on a second screen, it can be incredibly powerful. So here's the thing we see. We see, I guess, the standard of a display ad in the UK. This is a Google figure, so the bottom figure there is the average click rate for a display ad is 0.07%. So one ad, sort of attritional warfare, one ad in every 1,800 is clicked. What we're seeing is that by placing ads that look like normal tweets, adjacent to tweets, we're seeing a 1 to 3% engagement. I think it's the illustration really that being in that interest environment is an incredibly potent place to be. So just back to that thing, does social media work? Is this a PR environment? We're really strongly convinced that this is a high productivity advertising environment. Let me give you 2 case studies. The one thing that people say all the time is there ROI in social media? And I think in the last 12 months, with sort of things that have happened and flotations, everyone who's had an opinion on the effectiveness of social media has been given license to have their moment in the sun, to say their quotation. I'm going to give you 2 examples. This is a first example of a case study of someone who drove ROI. So Samsung had a hard metric. This wasn't brand buzz, this wasn't awareness. They wanted to drive downloads of an app during the Olympics. They came to us and they did a campaign just using Twitter to target the downloads of the app. First thing, the download rate they achieved was 3 times higher than the next best buy on the plan. So just being in that interest environment drove people to download. But the interesting thing is, for each download they paid for, they got 4 earned media. So the fact paid, owned, earned is, I think, becoming an increasing standard of the industry, how people are talking about it. The ability to have earned media baked into the product, I think, is really potent. The other thing is, and I think almost it's a reflection of the way that we work now, Samsung categorized the people who downloaded the app into 3 areas. Low engagers are people who download an app who never use it. So we mentioned before that a whole load of people download apps and the volume of apps. A lot of people never use an app. A few people use it once or twice. They categorize them as medium engagers. The people who came from Twitter, 92% of them were high engagers, so they used the app more than 3 times. So an illustration really, firstly, that social media can work, very effectively can work. That's an online example. Let me give you an offline example, just about moving people and getting people in store. Starbucks did a campaign with us. Do you remember that day of summer we had in May? Well, on that day, they ran a campaign which was offering half price frappuccinos. And so they invited people in store. Firstly, of the people who saw the ad, half of them engaged with it. Right, that's worth sort of saying again. So of the people who saw that frappuccino ad, half of them either retweeted it to the people who follow them, or they replied to it, or they clicked on it. Half of the people engaged with the ad. So, back to, is this a PR environment? Is this something that works? We're really strongly convinced this works for advertisers. Next, we used a tool called Crimson Hexagon to track footfall. So effectively, that looked at check-ins, either open check-ins on Facebook, Foursquare, or on Twitter. Footfall increased by 68%. So you can see an image that we captured there of people queuing out the door. This stuff really works. This isn't PR, this stuff really drives people. I'm going to give you just some more of that compete data here now. So I've mentioned retweeting, and I've mentioned the earned media effect a few times. Here's what we did with the guys from Compete. We looked and we tried to explore why people would retweet something. Let me talk you through the data here. So first thing is, 2/3 of people say they retweet something to share what's happening right now. That moment of passing on a piece of news. Anyone who uses Twitter or any social product will know the moment of revelation where a big news story breaks and you want to distribute it yourself. But also, you see far more about how the product works. So 48% of people say that they want to pass on a fun comment. The platform really works, and I think all social media has one part humour to its DNA. It really works about distributing that. The top one is freebies, 57%. Second one that is really interesting for most brands, 51% of people pass on photos. In fact, it's the most popular content on Twitter, and often it helps brands understand what their content strategy should be. Just passing on a photograph is an incredibly easy thing to do, and it's what we love doing. So just a good illustration of how Compete helped us to understand that phenomenon. I'm just going to look really quickly at how this works. So, back to the different uses of the platform. And this, to some extent, goes to Sir Martin's point about the PR effect and the advertising effect. We're going to look at 2 campaigns here. One for Nectar, one for LG. One is a PR campaign, effectively, a free campaign. And what you're going to see here is you're going to see the way that the campaign plays out in real time. So they're very similar mechanics. And I've chosen Nectar because it's one of the best free campaigns we could find. So they're very similar. They're daily deal offers, trying to distribute content and tickets to promote daily deals. What you'll see is hopefully you'll be able to see these, they're tiny dots. So the monitor screens might be more helpful. What you'll see is that as the campaigns start, tiny blue dots, you're not going to bloody see it, the tiny blue dots represent tweets, and white nodes represent retweets. And what you can see is, or hopefully you can see, is that the campaign on the right-hand side, the LG campaign, through using promoted products, just distributes itself to a wider audience. So effectively, by propelling it with paid media, the earned media becomes amplified. Let me show that in real money, so traditional methods. What I've done on this slide is I've taken out all of the paid elements. So this just looks at, aside from the paid elements, what was the earned effect of each different campaign. So you can see actually for free, the PR effect of Nectar achieved 500,000 reach. For a free campaign, for a PR campaign, to Sir Martin's point, that's really effective. What you can see though is that the LG campaign, by adding some weight of advertising behind it, just achieves 4 times that reach. And we see this time and time again. So the evidence we've got is that the earned media effect is enhanced by advertising more on the platform, spending more on the platform. Back to that point that we made before. Yes, there is a PR element, but actually it's really strongly enhanced. So I think just an illustration really of the effect we're seeing here. See if I can click that on. So just another point, how we're seeing this, the way that this has been advertised and integrated into the modern world. I think brands like Nike started the year like this with the hashtag Make It Count, and through the Olympics, I think Adidas were just formidable at least, just integrating hashtags into everything they do. So taking those things that I've mentioned before, the ability to hold a conversation together, to have a focal point of what's going on, also to amplify the earned effect of what they're doing. So hopefully I've given you perspective really. Certainly we don't see Twitter as a PR medium. We see really strongly that being aligned to people's interests and passions is an incredibly potent place to be. And I think, one of the things that we're increasingly finding is that if you look at the growth of a lot of the businesses that have strongly grown in the last few years in the world of digital, they tend to be based on interruptions to what people are doing. So if you think of businesses like YouTube, really short session lengths, Facebook, very similar, people punctuating what they're doing, filling the gaps between different media. I think it's really important for people to understand that. So consequently, Twitter tends not to be like other things, like something that you'd come along and you consume for a long session, but it's something that you come along and you consume as a punctuation. And really, if brands understand that, I think the interweaving of that interest DNA into the notion that this is a place that you go either alongside your existing media or to accompany it is really important. We often talk about Twitter being a layer over other media rather than something that is going to replace it. So I think just that emphasises that. So what have we talked about? Firstly, Twitter helps your brand messages move further and faster. It allows you to take those messages and by linking them to people's interests and passions, it just allows you to distribute them to a wider place. It's the shortest distance between you and what interests you most. I think for brands, it's the shortest distance between brands and what interests their customers most. So as a result, we're seeing people using it to just help move their brand narrative on and to move their whole message on. Back to that point I made before, I'm just going to end on this final thing. We're seeing a total change in the way that people are consuming media. And certainly, I think we're becoming increasingly addicted to our phones. It's really potent. 80% of our audience is on mobile phones, and we're seeing that people are actually, it's becoming a sort of defining part of their media diary. And I just want to end on this really, just as an illustration of how it's taking hold of our lives and how by putting advertising messages on it, you can find yourself in a very high attention environment. This is a clip from US TV.
Garbage cans are out too.
Yeah, just a couple of minutes ago, the bear left the clearing in the backyard there, and he made his way over to the driveway over on Mayfield. He came down that driveway, down Mayfield, and now he's on Briggs, and now it looks like he's turning into another driveway here. We're going to kind of maneuver around and see if we can get another shot of him. But yeah, he would definitely.
Right there.
Oh, man. We got someone, a resident there.
He just saw the bear.
Good illustration, really. This is a very high attention environment and just a massive opportunity for you to take advantage of. So good. Hopefully I've illustrated that, look, this is a platform to move passions, to move actions, and ultimately, as a result, to move ideas and finally to move people. Thank you very much.